Good afternoon, everyone. Ani, Bojo, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I know we have folks joining this workshop webinar from coast to coast to coast. So really happy to have all of you here. We broke the 100 mark as far as the number of people who registered. So we will spend just the first couple minutes landing in, welcoming those who are just joining us from the waiting room. And then we'll get started in about another minute or so. So take your seats, get comfortable, grab that last cup of water, cup of coffee to settle in and spend the next 90 minutes with us here at the Indigenous Climate Monitoring Toolkit launch. It is so fantastic to see all your faces. Welcome, welcome. So maybe I'll actually start with an introduction and a little bit of housekeeping while we wait for everyone else to come in from the waiting room. And thank you, Jessica, for monitoring that waiting room for us. So Ani, Bojo, Melissa Hamill, Indigenous, Ottawa Nindojaba, Makwendodam. My name is Melissa Hamill, and it is my honor and my pleasure to be joining you here today from First Peoples Group. We are calling in from unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory in the Ottawa region. And I've got my colleague Jessica on the line too. I'll just get Jessica to give a little wave. Jessica is going to be taking notes today and monitoring our chat and helping with some of this, the housekeeping and admin, just being that helper in the background. I've been with First Peoples Group for almost 7 years now. And before that, spent the better part of my career at the Wabano Centre for Aboriginal Health here in Ottawa. And we have had the pleasure of working alongside the toolkit authors of the Indigenous Climate Monitoring Toolkit since just before the pandemic hit. And it has been a wonderful adventure to journey alongside this great team of folks from partnering with CERNA, but then also bringing together this team of authors to create this toolkit over the last few years. It's been an adventure. We're going to be walking you through that story today. We're going to do a little bit of a ribbon cutting for this website that has been live for just over a year, but it continually is new and improved. And we just added a brand new section to the website and that we'll be very excited to share with you today. So a little bit of housekeeping before we dive right into the agenda. Of course, you are all familiar with Zoom by now. We have a lot of people on this call, so 60 and counting. The call is being recorded and will be put onto the website. The settings of the recording are such that only the person speaking and whatever is being shared on the screen is what is being recorded. So for example, if you see gallery view right now and you see a number of names of people who are choosing to have their cameras off, you won't be able to see that in the recording. If you do come on camera, especially at the question and answer period, and we would love to see faces come online for camera, note that will be recorded. The chat is also being recorded, but won't be published anywhere. That's just for our note taking. And you're welcome to use that chat box throughout to make comments or to place your questions if you want to save them for later. Since we have so many people, we will be running through our presentation first, and then we'll have a good half an hour for discussion, Q&A, and community sharing as well. And we're really excited about that, really excited to have you all here and to hear your voices and to have you be part of this virtual launch. Next in housekeeping, Zoom housekeeping, I think the only other thing to mention is that reactions button. When we do to get to the Q&A, feel free to use it to raise your hand. It looks a little something like this. You can personalize it as well. You can lower your own hand, and that'll be a way to put you in the queue. You can also use that reactions button to access all of the emojis in Zoomland, and feel free to react to whatever you're hearing that way as well. Just makes it a little bit more interactive. We wish we could be 100 people in a room together cutting an actual ribbon, but here we are online, as is the way of the world post-pandemic. I think that's all for housekeeping. Our agenda today, we're going to receive some words of welcome from our partners at the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program. After that, Molly from ICBCM and myself will take you on a virtual tour. We'll share our screen and take you on a tour of the toolkit, of the website itself. And then we've got Huey Jones here, who is one of our toolkit authors. And at 1:30, so in about 20 minutes time, Huey will walk us through the stories that are shared from his community and talk a little bit about his experience as a toolkit author. Following that presentation, we will go into an interactive Q&A, and we would love to have folks come onto camera and come off of mic and speak into any comments, questions that you would like to share with us today. First, before I pass the mic on to Marlene from CERNA, I just want to start with a little bit of an opening. Jessica and I were in a room, we were in a circle a couple of months ago, and it was a really interesting, in-person circle with 30 people, and we were trying to do things hybrid, and the hybrid part wasn't working. Like, the tech was failing us. And the elder who was with us, who was an elder who we often work with here in Ottawa, she kind of said, okay, stop the nonsense with this trying to get technology work. And she reminded us again of those medicine wheel teachings and about how all the four human aspects that you can layer onto that medicine wheel. So your physical self, your emotional self, and your mental self, and your spiritual self. But she said, so often we forget to start with spirit. And there is so much spirit woven through the creation of the toolkit and the final product as well. And I hope that you feel that spirit when you're going through and navigating that website. But my version of starting with spirit today is a little bit of storytelling from Richard Wagamese, one of my very favorite authors. And this book, Embers, never leaves my bedside table. So this morning, I randomly opened up a page, and I thought it would be a passage that was really appropriate for this launch. And Richard says, to be struck by the magnificence of nature is to be returned again, in all too brief moments, to the innocence in which we were born. Awe, wonder, humility. We draw them into us and are altered forever by the unquestionable presence of Creator. All things ringing true together. If we carry that deep sense of communion back into our workday lives, everyone we meet benefits. This is what we are here for, to remind each other of where the truth lies and the power of simple ceremony. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Marlene Doyle from CERNA, who will give a little bit of background, a little bit of that origin story for this toolkit. Chimigwech, thanks, Marlene, for being with us today.
Oh, thanks, Melissa. And thanks so much for your warm words, inspiring words to start us off. Can you hear me okay? I'm coming through? Okay, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Nice to see some familiar names on the line and some other new faces. My name is Marlene Doyle, and as Melissa said, I manage the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program at CERNAC, and we've had the privilege of being involved with the Indigenous Climate Monitoring Toolkit since the beginning. So my role here today, as Melissa said, is just to introduce you to the toolkit a little bit, Very briefly, I'll just mention that our program, the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program, has a mandate to support Indigenous communities across Canada with monitoring climate and the impacts of climate change. So we work closely with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis partners all across the country. And on the toolkit, you can find some of the inspiring stories of the projects that we've supported over the years. Part of our program mandate is to support collaboration and networking and really developing and sharing tools related to climate monitoring. Early in the program, we heard through community engagement. We had a big symposium back in 2018, and we started to onboard projects and talking to some of the folks that were working in the space, heard a lot about the need for resource place to access information about climate monitoring, best practices, how folks have done it in the past, what's worked well and what hasn't. And so with that, we started off on this journey, as Melissa said, way back in 2019. We reached out to Inuit, First Nations, and Métis partners that we worked with through our governance committees and through our program. And we're able to identify a number of partners that wanted to come on board as what we call co-authors on this initiative. And over a period of about 2 years, that team worked together to help define what this toolkit would be. We settled very early on the idea of having it as a living system through a web interface, as a website. And the group was very keen on making that interactive. In addition, the team really helped to define the scope and the steps that you will see on the page as a framework. First Peoples Group was there since the beginning with us as well. And Dr. Brenda Parley with the University of Alberta played a really important role early in the development of the toolkit, with helping to bring us together and providing some guidance and leadership on the initiative. And I would also like to thank a number of partners that provided some early feedback on the toolkit through our governance committees and others that we use to really shape and rework the toolkit as you see it now. Spruce Creative was an integral partner as well in developing the website and all of the beautiful images and iconography that you can see there. So today, that's I'm really hoping that you find this session valuable. But what I really wanted to emphasize is that the toolkit is meant to be open to everyone to contribute towards. So as you can see, there's a map on the site. We would welcome any new additions if you wanted to see your monitoring initiative representative there, if you had interesting tools that you thought could be relevant to share to a broader audience, or if you have a story to share. So please welcome and look forward to hearing more about those types of initiatives. Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Marlene. And next, I will invite Marlene's coworker, Molly, to join me in coming on camera and off of mute to take a tour of the website. Molly, did you want to introduce yourself there first while I get the share screen going?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. My name is Molly Morse, and I'm calling in from unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin territory, just north of Gatineau. And I have been working with the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program for about 6 years now. And I've been involved in this particular project over the last couple of years. And it's been an amazing experience working with these Indigenous partners to have this vision and then to turn that vision into a tangible website that is ever changing, but hopefully improving over time.
Fantastic. Thanks, Molly. So I guess this is the official launch right here with the share of this screen. So really, really happy to have you all be a part of this. This is not the final product because, as Marlene mentioned, this is an evergreen project. And the nice thing about it being a website is that we can change it, we can add to it. And it's already gone through 2 years of really complex iterations. When we handed it over to Spruce, the graphic designers, we said, oh, we just want it to be this little website. And it turned out to have, hundreds of pages of contents within one website. So they just did a really amazing job at helping us to be succinct in the sharing of, a lot of information. So this is the landing page, and I hope you'll forgive me. I'm going to I'm not going to go in the order of the tabs on the top. We're going to do a little bit of a choose your own adventure back and forth here using the tabs, and Molly and I will talk through the different components of the website. So right here on this landing page, if you scroll down, you have your first instructions for how to use the toolkits. It highlights the steps, the stories, and the resources section, which are the main places that you're going to go to get the information that will help your community to connect to basically anything climate monitoring, which is really exciting. I'm going to skip ahead here to About Us, which Marlene covered really well. It gives that origin story that that Marlene mentioned. And I'll also mention when we were brought on board at the beginning of the project, at first we were planning to bring this author team together in person for a couple of 2 or 3 day workshops to develop the toolkit. And that, of course, was in March of 2020. So we all know what happened then. Travel wasn't possible. And we, like the rest of the world, had to change our plans a little bit for how we were going to work together. But actually, it was a silver lining for this team because they're from different regions all across the country. We were able to meet online. Zoom was very, very new. So was Teams, and we met over dozens of meetings rather than in a more concentrated in-person workshop. On this page on About Us, you can scroll down to get a biography of each of the toolkit authors and everyone who helped us really put this together. And there was such great collaboration over those years. And I just want to pause here to remember Cliff Superno, who was our elder for the first year of this work. And Cliff, tragically passed away in October of 2020. So we do miss him. But what Cliff was really instrumental in bringing to this website and to this toolkit is the concept of ethical space, which is something that he really centered in all of the work that he did with the Métis Nation as well. So when we say that the toolkit was developed with ethical space in mind, it means that the team really consciously worked together to acknowledge and to celebrate and to respect the collaboration between Indigenous and non-Indigenous knowledge systems, where both come to the circle equally, where neither are more important than one another, and that having that value of ethical space really requires deep listening. It requires time and a conscious effort on both parts to meet and to know each other deeply and to take action together. It's that conscious awareness of 2 or more different systems coming together. Ethical space also goes in hand really well with two-eyed seeing. And some of the two-eyed seeing approaches that are used on this website are that acknowledgement of diversity and a distinctions-based approach. And you'll see that there are stories from First Nations, from Métis communities, from Inuit communities as well. When we get to the steps section, the wheel and the graphics are a representation of ethical space as well. And then, of course, when we get to the stories, you'll see that different worldviews are braided together, and that those stories and the way that they're laid out on the website also appeal to many different learning styles. So you can watch videos, you can read, you can go to links to other websites, you can connect directly with the communities through the map. So those are all different ways that this team has incorporated ethical space into the work. There's acknowledgements there on the website as well, and you can click on the ethical space link to learn more about it, to watch a Willie Ermine video on what is ethical space, and it brings you through to, why this is important as well. You'll note that every page that's embedded in the website has key questions and considerations, as well as links to resources. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to go next to the steps page. So these are the different steps that offer guidance on how to plan, design, and implement a community-based climate monitoring project in your own community. If you come from a community that is already doing these kinds of projects, lots of the information will be familiar, but we're hoping that having it displayed in these steps is really a great way to, walk through really step by step to get to where you want to go for either starting brand new or taking that next step on your climate monitoring journey. As mentioned just a few minutes ago, each of the steps are represented visually on this wheel here, and there is that visual representation of ethical space throughout. So you can click on each of the steps. I'm going to start with setting goals and planning, just to show you an example of what each page looks like. Every page, as I mentioned, has a why it's important, has a key questions and considerations, and has links to resources that connect directly to this topic, whatever the step is. So just showing you those key considerations, setting goals, helpful tips. Anytime you see a plus sign on the website, you're going to click on it, and it will be a drop down or a pop out window that will give you some more information or samples or helpful hints. So you can see that within this step, there are many different sub-steps, and you'll want to take your time going through each one. And sometimes they'll just have little prompts for you to consider, and other times there will be links to other spots on the website. So here's a tool spotlight that clicks into grants and funding, and then again, that connection to resources. If I go back to that steps landing page here, you'll note that there are 7 steps. And then in addition to the 7 steps, there's in-depth information on ethical space, on health and safety, and on sustainability and funding, knowing that each of those 3 topics weaves through all of the different steps that are here. Molly, is there anything that you wanted to add about these steps before we go on to the map of projects?
You've done a great job of summarizing it, Melissa. I would just say that, although we've laid out the steps, undertaking a climate monitoring project or any kind of environmental monitoring project can be a bit of an iterative process. And so the steps were a way to lay it out, but I would imagine as a practitioner, you might be jumping around a little bit as you encounter different challenges or opportunities with your project.
Great, thanks. Just have a Windows thing happening here. All right. So next I'm going to, there we go. Next, I'm going to bump on over to the map of projects, just to show you a really cool interactive piece that's here. So this map includes some of the Indigenous-led climate monitoring related projects that have taken place or that are ongoing across Canada. So you can actually contact us to add your project to the map if you don't see it here, to update your project and to add a resource to this map. So I'm going to show you what it looks like here. And each dot represents a different climate monitoring project that's happening across the country. So if I click on a dot, it'll tell me that this one is the Mikisew Cree First Nation. And the description is a project to purchase and install hydrometric stations, buoys, and trail cameras in the Peace Athabasca Delta to provide real-time data on water and ice conditions. It says what the starting years are, what the indicators monitored are. And this is, as you can see, a lot of information on one page, on one map. So you can use all of the boxes over here on the left to filter through for exactly what you might be looking for. So if you are a First Nation, you're looking for First Nations, and you want to know all the projects that are happening in Manitoba, and you only want the ones that are climate related, then you click on this toggle here, and there are only 2 to choose from. So you can click on those and find that Black River First Nation is doing a project on the monarch butterflies, and click on the next one to learn about Poplar River First Nation. And we know that there are more First Nations climate-related projects happening in Manitoba, and that's why we're constantly adding to this map. So a really neat way for communities to connect to one another, to get at that big picture view of the climate monitoring landscape that's happening with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit from coast to coast to coast. Next, we'll pop over to the resources library, and I'll have Molly talk about how the resources library has grown and changed, because this is, if you have been to the site before, you probably haven't seen this new resource library yet, and then we'll get to stories after that. Go ahead, Molly.
Thanks, Melissa. So this is the newest addition to the website, as Melissa mentioned. And so when the website was first created, we knew that there would be a lot of resources referenced throughout the site, but I don't think we had an appreciation of just how many. And we found that some of that information, it was easily buried, among the steps. So we had this idea to create a searchable resource library or database that would house all of the resources that are cited throughout the toolkit. And this could include anything from reports to other websites to videos, etc., on a variety of topics. As you can see, we currently have 290 resources that are included in the database, with more being added all the time. Similar to the map, we included some filters because it can be a little bit overwhelming. And we also included a search bar so that if you have a key topic in mind, you can put a keyword in there. And we're still working on the keywords. Maybe that one's too broad. You could probably try, I don't know, like moose or something. Melissa, I don't know. See what pops up. But oh, no moose today. But yeah, so we're still kind of playing with the keywords to make it as user friendly as possible. And you can also search by region, by resource type. So if you, for example, were just interested in videos that are referenced on the site, this is an easy way to find them. You can also change the number of resources that appear on the page, and as I said, this is a work in process in progress. It was recently created, and so we're certainly open to feedback, of how we can make the tool itself better, but also any resources. And I think we've already said this, but I just want to emphasize it, and especially Melissa, when you were talking about the map. Although the genesis for this website came about, because of what my program had heard from the folks that we were working with, but the site really is for everyone, and so you don't need to have any sort of prior affiliation or future affiliation with our program to hopefully benefit from this site. And so, although that map currently contains a lot of the projects that my program has funded over the years, the idea is that that map is not limited to projects that we've been involved with, and that the hope and the desire is that this site will really take on kind of a life of its own and serve the intended audience, which is Indigenous communities across the country. However, I will note that there's also been some international interest, which we're really excited and a little bit surprised about. So that's great. And similarly, just in terms of contributing a resource, you don't have to have any prior connection to the program to do that. So this is really, we wanted to get this out in the world so that it would benefit as many people as possible.
Excellent. Thanks, Molly. And that's actually just a great segue into stories. Do you want to talk a little bit about the stories section, and then we'll invite Huey to share his story, Molly?
Sure. So the idea behind the stories was really to inspire others, to inform others, and also to try not to reinvent the wheel. A lot of Indigenous communities have capacity challenges. They have folks wearing many different hats, and nobody can really afford the time and the energy that goes into doing something. If you can learn from your neighbor down the road or across the country, and benefit from any lessons that they might have learned from their work. So we started out with a small group of stories, and we hope to grow it over time. And we wanted to make sure that we got different perspectives, and so we included First Nations, Inuit, and Métis stories, and we hope to continue to expand the list of stories over time. We've had a few added since the website first came to light, and we there's a few more in the works, and we hope that maybe after this event, there might be some more interest in contributing stories, so that other communities can benefit from your experience.
Yes,
so
love to
the format of
stories.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The format. I mean, the right now the stories, just because there's not too many of them just yet. So right now we have them grouped by theme. Over time, as they get added to, we might have to rethink that a little bit. So we have them grouped under wildlife and vegetation, and land and water, and climate and weather. And so when you click on one of these lovely photographs, it takes you straight to the story. And similar to some of the other sections, we've tried to introduce a little bit of a structure for each story. So you're going to see a bit of a description, and we've invited the story authors to also include any resources that were relevant to them and they think that others could benefit from. And I know we'll be getting to more in depth on this particular story when we hear from Dr. Huey Jones.
Yeah, excellent. And why don't we invite Huey on now, and then we'll be able to we'll do one more overview of the website once Huey is done and answer. We'll have ample time for Q&A as well. So Dr. Huey Jones from Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation is here with us today, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and so that I can see Huey, and I know that he wanted to share his screen on a couple of slides as well. Welcome, Huey.
Yeah, I have a presentation here, and I thought that I could take advantage of this great opportunity to share a little bit of my story. It's going to take me about 25 minutes. I can cut that down if that's fine, if you prefer, but maybe we'll just go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, 20, 25
okay,
minutes.
Yeah.
And then we'll still have half an hour for Q&A. That's fantastic. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, beautiful. Give me a second here. Okay, give me a moment. Let me see if I can get this. Can't face my camera when I do it, so that's okay. Apologies. Let's see here. Okay. I need you to enable sharing there. I don't know if
it should be ready to go now.
Should be good. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to make sure I have my audio shared. Yeah, there we go. Well, good day, everybody. Yeah, it's a great honor to be here today, and kind of gets me a little bit emotional looking at the toolkit, thinking back to all the hard work that's gone into that. And I want to thank Molly and Marlene for not giving up on this push to have this resource. I think it's as well as Melissa and others. I think it's something that, in hindsight, I wish I had to assist me when I started the work that I've been doing at Alexis. And yeah, it's really beautiful to see, and being fortunate enough to be involved. I know how much work went into it, and I remember working with Marlene and Molly, kind of grinding behind the scenes to put something together. And I know that there's some heads dropping into some hands with frustration and challenges as this has come together. So I really hope that other First Nations, Inuit, and Métis get something out of this, and that it truly does become its own living entity. And but I think the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program really, I would say, kickstarted my career, and I think the toolkit will be a big part of moving forward. I think starting out as a young Indigenous scientist, you're always looking for opportunities, and I think that the challenges Indigenous people face, can be a little bit different than non-Indigenous, and for better or for worse. And I think for better, being able to be a recipient of this funding and being involved in the toolkit has built me a very rich career that's full of a lot of excitement, and so I'm really grateful for this past 5 years. I've grown as a in my career, kind of in proportion to this program, and alongside the toolkit. So, but today I wanted to talk a little bit about my story, and the title of my little talk here is called Treaty Rights, Land Use, and Eutrophication. And so climate change is not in there, but it ties very directly to the work that I've been doing at my band, Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. And let's see here. Okay. Just a quick outline. I'm just going to do an introduction of myself and where I'm from and how I got here, and then dive right into talking about the Wakamne Science and Culture Initiative, which is essentially the environmental department of Alexis Nakota Sioux Nation. environmental departments are something that, as far as I understand, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis don't always have, and aren't always well supported. So I've been kind of able and fortunate to piece together something that resembles an environmental department at my First Nation because of this program, which is really beautiful. Going to dive into some discussion around treaty rights and climate and water quality, and then just hopefully end with some ideas about the future and what the path forward is for myself, and hopefully provide some inspiration for other people on the call. So I'm Irish, English, and Stoney. So throughout my life, I've been really stuck between two worlds: my First Nation family, and then my non-Indigenous family. And so I was always fighting with my Stoney brothers, and they wanted to beat me up, and all the Irish and English people and other people I knew off reserve, they wanted to beat me up too. So I was always in a fight, and I kind of grew up not really enjoying that, but I think it's led to a unique situation for me in life, and a really beautiful one. And this is where I grew up, near Rich Valley, Alberta. I would say in a fairly dysfunctional environment, but that's okay. I think we all have some of that. But I did well in school, and I was fortunate enough to go to the University of Alberta, which is, a world-class institute. And I kind of fell into this through serendipity. And I think you'll see in my story that serendipity has been a big part of my whole life. So maybe some of you can relate to that. I was kind of tired of the classroom, and I decided that I wanted to get some work experience. I applied for an internship with the climate change group at the Northern Forestry Center in Edmonton, working with these fine people with Natural Resources Canada. And I worked on the Boreal Forest Transect case study for a few years, which was really, really, really interesting and a great experience. And I also worked on carbon and water balance study for hybrid poplar afforestation projects. And so that project, the federal government and other industry partners were interested in planting hybrid poplar across Canada to provide renewable sources of fiber, biomass for bioenergy, as well as, there was a discussion about what is the carbon sequestration potential of planting these forests. And when I was at the Northern Forestry Center, I got asked by my boss, Dr. Jagtar Bhatti. He said, one of the students quit at UBC that I was helping during the summers. And he said, we'd like you to step up and do a master's and help us with our hybrid poplar work. And he said, you have two choices. You can either go to the University of Manitoba and work with Brian Amiro, or you can go to Vancouver and work with Dr. Andrew Black. And so I'd lived on the prairies my whole life, and I'd never been to Vancouver, but I saw photos like this. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I was working in Winnipeg, and I'm thinking this is what Winnipeg looks like. So I think I'm going to go to Vancouver. I'm kind of tired of the prairies for now. I'm tired of freezing out here in the cold. So I went to the University of British Columbia, and I got to work with a really incredible mentor, Dr. Andrew Black. And he's a biometeorologist, and I'm a biometeorologist. And we study how living organisms are impacted by their environment and how living organisms impact their environment. And so during my master's, I was with Andy, and I worked on studying water use of hybrid poplar plantations. And we were really focusing on long-term monitoring. So we were focusing on right from when plants are planted in the ground to, mid-life cycle. What was the carbon and water balance of these hybrid poplar plantations that were coming into different parts of Canada? And so we did some pretty pioneering and interesting work looking at evaporation. And this is just a graph from one of the papers we published showing evaporation from this crop as it grew in its first few years. So we were using techniques that I still use to this day called eddy covariance, which allows us to monitor greenhouse gas and water vapor fluxes from the Earth's surface. And as I gained knowledge about this technique, and I worked with an elder in the university community, I really saw that our ability to use this technology to understand how land use changes climate and how land use changes features of our environment, it kind of got me as close to understanding kind of the living spirit of ecosystems as much as Western science could get me. The ability to monitor how a leaf breathes or how an ecosystem breathes is a really beautiful thing, and it tells you a lot. The ecosystem will tell you, whether it's living a healthy life or if it's suffering. So it's kind of interesting. In my PhD, I got a chance to work with Dr. Black again, and we were looking at using different plastic films to modify microclimate for crop growth and season extension for farmers in British Columbia. And near the end of my PhD, I found this grant, which just resonated with me based off its name, really. And that was the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program. And so I approached my professor, and I wasn't done my PhD yet. And I said, I have to apply for this grant. And, he knew how much work I'd put into my PhD, and he thought I was crazy. But I said, I'm not really asking for your permission. I'm kind of just telling you I'm going to be applying for this, and I'm going to do my PhD and start this proposal. And so he knew how stubborn I was after working with him for 7 or 8 years. And so away I went. And this is how the program kind of presented itself to me. And, I'd never really intended on going back to work with my community. But this is the power of serendipity. And so I applied for the program and thought that it would be a great fit for me because I had trained in climate science, and I was excited to come back and maybe make an impact in my community. So these were some of the goals of the project. So support long-term monitoring, which I knew I could contribute to. I'm a community member at Alexis, so there would be a community-led component there. And I guess the biggest part that I struggled with, which maybe others do as well, is how do you really incorporate or how do you merge or marry, Indigenous knowledge with Western science? And that's been a really challenging but beautiful journey. And it's a story of how I've come back to my community and been able to provide some cutting edge work, but also, relearn my own culture and go through an experience of reconnecting. So I spent a lot of time in academic institutions getting indoctrinated. And so I'm relearning how to live in this, in my own community. So what really came out of that, and I won't go through the whole story, but I'll show you where we're at this point. This ultimately led to the establishment of the Wakamne Science and Culture Initiative. Really the first proposal that I was successful in getting was the one I mentioned. And it's not the only funding that's been supporting this initiative, but it really started it all for me. So currently I have about 10 staff that work full-time and part-time with the organization. We're about half and half Indigenous, non-Indigenous. And, by virtue of my academic training and credentials and the unique work that we do, I'm able to recruit university students to come work with us, and they feel like they can build their careers within our organization. So it's pretty cool. And we've been able to support a lot of our community members to work as well. And the mission statement of the organization that I work with is to mobilize Indigenous and scientific knowledge to protect treaty rights. And I think that that's kind of developed over the years. And I think it's a center point, and I'll explain why treaty rights is what was chosen here. And it might change. But early on, I didn't really know how to document traditional knowledge. I didn't know how to incorporate it into my work. So basically what we did is we went and bought some 4K cameras and some microphones and began to sit down with elders and ask them what their feelings were about the degradation of the land, the decline in water quality, and climate change. So we were looking at how was these very observable changes in the landscape impacting their mental health, their ability to practice their treaty rights, and to live a life that they traditionally did. And then I brought some of the monitoring equipment that I was using at UBC into the community and began looking at the topic of eutrophication, which I'll talk about a bit in a few minutes. But just to kind of talk a little bit about treaty rights, in Treaty 6, where I'm working, as it's read in the treaty, we were to cede, release, and surrender and yield all the rights, titles, and privileges whatsoever to the land, which is a pretty big surrender. In exchange, we shall have the right to pursue our avocation of hunting and fishing throughout the tracts surrounding, and then from time to time, land can be taken up for settlement, mining, lumber, and other purposes. And as we know now, in Alberta, that's kind of been taken to the limit. And so there's this discussion within our community and across Canada, if you're in these groups, is, if you're devastating the ecosystems to a level that you cannot hunt and fish without finding contaminated fish, or you can't find your traditional medicines or your traditional foods, that we're really getting the short end of this agreement. So this is just a little bit on the Constitution Act. But what I've come to learn is that, we have to continue to exercise our treaty rights as Native people. And that when it comes to the government or the federal government, provincial government, or industry partners wanting to do large scale energy projects, for instance, or mining operations, we have the burden of proof to show a connection to the land. We have a burden of proof to show that there's a risk to the environment. And so we're in the fight for our lives here, really, as we have been for a long, long time. And I think there's a lot of value in using the stories and knowledge from the community members who still practice traditional lifestyles. And there's a lot of power in, Western science and its ability to empower those arguments and create a third approach, or a third kind of perspective that marries the heart, the beauty, and the knowledge of Indigenous perspectives and the rigor and believability of Western science, right? So I think together they're stronger. And the topic that I chose to focus on right from the get-go was eutrophication. So Dr. David Schindler, who was working at the University of Alberta, who some of you may know or may have known, I didn't get a chance to meet him, was a pioneer in this topic of eutrophication and worked heavily on the experimental lakes in Eastern Canada. And in this book, he describes how cultural eutrophication, or the over-fertilization of aquatic ecosystems by human beings, is the greatest threat to our water resources across the world. And it outpaces all other concerns related to heavy metals, oil spills, and other toxins. So I thought, let's pick something crazy and try and work on this topic. And at my community, we live right on a lake called Wakamne, which is also known on the map as Lac Saint Anne. And Wakamne means God's lake. And it's well known that there's observable changes in climate over time, and that there's also a really bad problem with water quality and water security for my First Nation. So, I thought this is a really fitting topic, and this topic spans, it really touches every community in Western Canada. So I think it's a worthy cause, and I'm really enjoying working on this topic. And the idea behind it in the community that I work in is that there's been a lot of conversion of land that was traditionally forest into agricultural operations. So whether that's cattle or intensive cropping operations, the agricultural industry is a big player in this topic of eutrophication, although there's other, improper disposal of human waste and illegal dumping and, other problems it's something we have to look at is agriculture and its impact on our aquatic ecosystems. So this area was traditionally all forested, and now it's been converted to agricultural lands. And here's just a little schematic. I'm sure many of you understand this is, how you treat the land will impact your waters. And this has been observable from the people who live close to the lake, both indigenous and non-indigenous. And when you talk to people, and when you're someone like me that lives between both worlds, I get to sit at the fires in the cottage country and listen to what non-indigenous people think about this problem. And I get to talk with indigenous people closely and ask them what they think about this topic of eutrophication and water pollution. And everybody's got a theory. And although this topic has been talked about for decades, I think there's a lot of work to be done to really apply rigor to understanding this topic, and also listen to the traditional mindset, because I think there's confusion and everybody's concerned, but nobody knows what to do. And I'm not saying that I know what to do necessarily. So anyways, in this Lac Saint Anne area, you can see an aerial map from 1950 that shows that there is ongoing agriculture in this area, but agriculture has intensified in this area, and as well as urbanization. So you have some areas close to the lake that are have more intensive agriculture and more expansive agriculture. You have a lot more urbanization. And this area on the bottom left that I've circled that's has quite a bit more agriculture is one of the hot spots for phosphorus and nitrate runoff into the lake. And it's funny because they have an annual pilgrimage that's right on the edge of the lake, and people in the area always say, oh, the natives have that pilgrimage. It's actually a Roman Catholic pilgrimage, but a lot of First Nations people attend, and they say, oh, whenever the native people come, the water always looks really polluted after they come. But what isn't known is that upstream of where the pilgrimage happens is a massive amount of agriculture that's profit driven and intensive that actually contributes to this problem of eutrophication. I would say probably a lot more than what they think is illegal dumping of sewage from the people that are attending the pilgrimage. So there's confusion. And this is an elder talking about Daniel Kootenay, and he's commenting on this topic of eutrophication and farming. So I'll go through that now.
Do you believe that there's a way to work with government and still maintain integrity of the land, like maintain Mother Nature, as well as have our culture be brought to the front, like to the forefront, without judgment or discrimination? Do you think it's possible to do that while maintaining our traditions?
Well, you see, money is the big,
right?
That's the big thing here. Because you making a lot of money, like the farm, we thought about the farm.
Yeah.
You go over from that bridge, you go over that big hill.
Yeah.
On that side, there's big farms there, big fields. And the equipment they put on there, you got to be a millionaire to buy equipment like that and go on there. So if you're going to teach them something, they think they listen to you, because all that money they're going to lose out. You change anything on there that you're not doing properly, they're not going to listen. They got money. And they got lawyers defending them. What chance do we have? So that's the big problem right now. But anybody that wants to live, wants to understand nature, them are the ones that will change it from the positive to the negative. And there's a way we can connect that we could survive, we could live, we respect each other. And most of all, we are not the bosses here. We look after Mother Nature because we live on it. We want Mother Nature here, at her best, you know.
Yeah, just a little bit of some of the interviews that we've done, you know, I'm probably going a little too far into this, but you know, if you look at a forest, this is a bit of a conceptual discussion. If you look at the traditional use or the traditional land was in forest, you know, you have an ecosystem that is living in harmony with what is on the land. You have an aquatic ecosystem that's living in harmony with what's on the land. And it's well known in this area that based on some water quality measurements that typically the forest will drain about 150 micrograms per liter as a concentration coming down the stream. And so that nutrients will fertilize the aquatic ecosystem, and you will have fish and vegetation growing inside of the lake. If you convert that use to intensive livestock operations or intensive cropping, and you don't manage riparian zones well, you have a new scenario, and measurements have shown that when you convert that land and you mismanage it, you can have almost a doubling in the concentration of phosphorus runoff into your aquatic ecosystems. You essentially fertilize the lake. You increase the concentration of phosphorus available to plants. You increase that biomass that's growing in the lake. And during nighttime conditions, when respiration is very high inside of the aquatic ecosystem, it depletes the water column of oxygen and you get large fish kills. And so I would argue that this is a center point for the discussion around, well, if your land use is impacting our aquatic ecosystems in this negative way, and you're killing off massive amounts of fish that are, you know, could be available to Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, that you're impeding on our treaty rights. And you're just impeding on the ecosystem in general. So I think this discussion needs to come to the forefront in our region. And this is some sediment cores that were taken from Lake Isle, which is upstream of Lac Saint Anne and Wakamne, and some sediment cores taken from Wakamne in the year 1997, I believe. And on the vertical axis, you can see year, and then on the horizontal axis, you can see phosphorus concentrations. And you see that the sediment has a much higher concentration of phosphorus after 1960, when it's well documented that there's a lot more application of fertilizer in these areas and an expansion of agriculture. So this is some work that was done by David Schindler's team. And here's some seasonal time series data of phosphorus and nitrates and chlorophyll A, where you see those peaking in late August. And some of the measurements that we've done on a lake called Birch Lake, which isn't heavily impacted by agriculture. I know the axes here are a little off, but you can see that at Birch Lake in August or early September, phosphorus concentrations are 24 micrograms per liter. And in Wakamne, they're 229. So there's a 10-fold difference between this lake that is not as heavily impacted by agriculture and this lake that is very, very impacted by agriculture. So it gives us a good reference point to have a discussion about what the ecosystem could be and maybe what it should be if we're managing that land for better water quality. So the work that was initially supported by the Indigenous Community-Based Climate Monitoring Program helped install some instrumentation along the shore of Wakamne. We were monitoring climate, and we were also using eddy covariance technology to monitor evaporation, which is directly related to climate. And we were also able to measure respiration and photosynthesis. So we're able to continuously monitor day and night, 365 days a year, evaporation and plant growth. So we're really tying into understanding how is this change in water quality. Also, how are changes in climate and water quality impacting how the ecosystem is breathing? And I think it's been really powerful. We do water quality measurements now, as I showed a little bit of that. And we've built up this program over the years, and the program we're talking about today really kickstarted it all. So I think these types of data sets are powerful. So here's a little picture of some of the instrumentation purchased through the program. And like I said, we're measuring how the lake breathes. Here's some of the data. You can see this is about a year ago. You can see some evaporation data. These are, it's hard for me to tell you and make you believe me, but these are high evaporation rates, for the area, which it's middle of the summer, so that's pretty normal. But on the bottom panel, you can see carbon flux. A positive flux would mean that there's very high respiration and no photosynthesis. That would be a nighttime condition. Those are the conditions under which you can have large fish kill when the vegetation's growing ferociously and there's a lot of biomass there. During the nighttime, there's just no oxygen left for the fish. And you can see during midday, the carbon flux is very large negative. And that's really a testament to how much photosynthesis is going on inside of the lake. And the value of -20 would be comparable to a fully mature aspen forest. So the lake is taking up carbon at a rate that's proportional or comparable to a forest that you would see when you walk outside your door. So it's kind of an insight that that is novel. And here's some of the data sets that we get. Failures happen and we don't get complete data sets, but you can see that we're evaporating about 0.5 meter of water each year. And that it's a little hard to see, but midsummer, there's large negative CO2 measurements, which are indicating that large photosynthesis uptake. And so really the path forward as far as the academic community is concerned and for First Nations people in my area is that we have to slow things down. We have to reconsider how we use the land if we're going to take this number of 250 and bring it back to something that was more native to the area. And I always worry that when I talk about this, that I alienate farmers and that I speak negatively about them. We've actually begun interviewing some farmers, and they want what's best for the environment too. And I think that these conceptual diagrams and these discussions have to be brought to the forefront for people to understand, why are things going so badly when we're all just trying to live together. And so I often try and not sound as if I'm bashing farmers, because I think they're an ally in this discussion. And, coming back to the toolkit, I think, I pieced this whole initiative together, I compare it to, building a fishing boat while you're trying to fish. It's extremely dysfunctional, and I pray for those who come after me to have the opportunity to use this toolkit to build something incredible for their community and maybe be able to do it with a little more structure. It's been a heck of a learning experience, and I'm just proud to have the chance to speak with you all today and to be able to have been part of the toolkit. So Ishnish, and thank you very much for the opportunity, and hope that wasn't too long. So thank you.
Jimmy Gwatch, thanks so much, Huey. Really detailed story from beginning to end. And I love that thought that it started with this program and that we could journey with you to tell the story along the way. So thank you for being here. We have another 20 minutes together, which is a really healthy amount of time to be able to take some question and answers. So if anyone has a question for Huey directly, Huey, you'll notice if you open the chat that there's some good comments coming in as you were doing your presentation. But if there's anything directly for Huey, as an author of the toolkit, or for myself or Molly and Marlene from CERNA, Let's just open up the floor. You can use your reactions button, as I mentioned, to put up a hand if you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, and I can keep a queue. That's the easiest way for me to keep a queue with so many people on the line. We'll start with Marnie. Go ahead.
Thank you. And I guess it's afternoon here where I'm situated. I'm in Edmonton today, heart of Treaty 6. Thank you for your presentation, Huey. I find it absolutely fascinating and very much in alignment with some of the work that I'm doing with a First Nation in Northeast BC. I wanted to go back to your slide that was speaking about the exercise of treaty rights. And the community that I'm working with did not sign treaty. So our assertion is based on Indigenous Section 35 rights. And I'm just wondering if you're making any distinction in your work with regard to that, and if you had any comments to share.
Yeah, I guess, I'm still learning through this process, and I'm no legal expert. I think, it's interesting. I think when you look at, for instance, in Treaty 6 rights, which the Cree and Stoney signed into, and you look at the Constitution Act, and then you look at UNDRIP, there's actually a lot of confusion, and I think for some people to say, well, don't be talking about UNDRIP because it actually detracts from our treaty rights. It's stealing away from our treaty rights. We have to come back to the origin agreement. And I think how I view the Constitution Act clauses is maybe a reaffirmation of our treaty rights, but that could be misguided. So I don't know if that comes anywhere near to answering your question, but it's challenging to understand it all, I would say, at the minimum.
Yes, very much so. But I think the takeaway really for the community I'm working with is to rely on the rights that are definitely proven and can be asserted. So thank you for that. And I think it speaks to the fact that there needs to be uniqueness and individuality in each of the projects that the various communities are working on.
Yeah, I think it's one follow-up comment there is, for instance, the Confederacy of Treaty 6 seeks to to kind of package all First Nations in Treaty 6 so the government can work with one organization, and that's convenient, but that's not, I don't think that's suitable.
Thanks, Marnie, and thanks, Huey. Anyone else with a question, a comment, or a story to share from your own community? Question from Eric, will the website be translated? It is actually translated. I forgot to mention that. Thank you very much. I had it in my notes and didn't click on that little FR in the top right corner. So the website is fully available in French, though not all of the 240 resources are. They'll click to the existing resource, and if it happens to be in another language, thanks to the person who originally posted it, then that's fine. But the content, the main body of the website is in both French and English. And thanks, Ashley. I just seen your comment. I know you're jumping off, but Ashley is one of our toolkit authors as well. Thanks for being with us on the line today. Really appreciate seeing your name on the list of attendees. There's actually a few folks in the room who have been part of this journey longer than today, so really appreciate you being here. I'm seeing some interest in the chat as well of keeping the conversation going. And I'm wondering the best way to go about that. I have obviously the email addresses of those who signed up, but I don't have that permission to share those, publicly without any permission. But Molly, or Marlene, is there somewhere where folks can go to sign up for your newsletter to find out more about the program itself, and we can provide updates through that?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Melissa, perhaps what we could do is, as you say, I could pop my contact info or the generic contact info in the chat, and folks can certainly reach it to us. We do have a newsletter that we do share every 2 months or so. That could be a way, but I really appreciate the questions or the interest in staying connected. One thing I did, Lucy popped a contact there. So thank you, Lucy, in the chat. But one thing I also wanted to mention is there is a website called the Indigenous Climate Hub, which provides a space for sharing information amongst Indigenous peoples related to climate change. And it also includes a members only forum, which it acts a little bit like Facebook for communities that are interested in staying connected in that kind of virtual space. But really, I think we can also try and convene more conversations like this, and very much appreciate the folks sharing your interest in keeping that conversation going.
Great. Thanks, Marlene.
Yeah. And can I also just say, that your story really touched me, Huey. So thanks so much for sharing it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate that. And also just to pick up on, there was a question in the chat, Melissa, about, and I just wanted to clarify it. There was a question about potentially having presentations for community leaders that are interested in using that. Mm-hmm. And I just want to see, would that be, if that's an interest in having perhaps Melissa or one of our team give a walkthrough of the toolkit, I think we can certainly look to organize something like that.
Yeah. So the recording for this whole meeting, this launch, if you share it with your communities, will be available on the toolkit, and maybe we'll include that in a future newsletter to be able to easily access this recording so that you can share it with others as well. I'm going to go to Elizabeth next, and then I'll get back to a couple of questions that have popped up in the chat. Elizabeth.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm struggling with a cold, so my voice isn't very strong at the moment. It's really a pleasure to attend this webinar. I'm glad I was sent it by email. I wasn't aware of this project before, so this has been a wonderful learning experience for me, and huge thank you to the presenters. The Huey, the presentation was really interesting, and to all of you to share knowledge on this website. I'm Elizabeth Bush. I work with the Climate Research Division of Environment Climate Change Canada. I'm joining your meeting from Toronto, which is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. So, wow, I have a million questions, but really what I was wondering, and I'll tell you why I joined the call, because in Environment and Climate Change Canada and in Climate Research Division, we're leading another scientific assessment report that's going to be assessing how climate in Canada is changing, and what changes are projected for the future. This is building on the original report that we did in 2019. That's on a website. I don't know if this community is aware of it, changingclimate.ca. That's the website where all the reports from the national assessment are delivered. Some of those reports have featured Indigenous knowledge and tried to integrate Indigenous knowledge into the assessments of impacts in different communities, and have and case studies of how communities are adapting to climate change. But the report that I was involved in 2019, and again now, is about just changes in the climate. And I know that's a very Western way of approaching things, to draw these boundaries around, we're only looking at changes in snow and sea ice and temperature and precipitation, and not looking holistically at what the meaning of those changes are for communities like your own. But in launching this report, this new report, again, recently, we are trying to live up to the progress that has been made within the broader national assessment to include Indigenous knowledge and science in the assessment reports. Anyway, so I'm really pleased to make contact with some of you, but also to Huey, maybe the question is, as all these communities are developing community monitoring programs, and the intent, I hope, is to do this on a long term so that you can develop long-term climate monitoring documentation. Unless I missed it, I think on the website there is something about documenting knowledge, sharing knowledge, both within communities, but also with external partners. And I just wondered if you could speak to that part of the community monitoring project a bit. So thank you for allowing me to ask the question.
Yeah, I think I was kind of fishing for a slide to talk about it, but I ran out of time here. And, one thing that it actually roots back to an engineer I worked with at UBC. He'd always come in and say, he says, "Where's your thesis?" And I said, "It's on my computer." And he'd say, "Well, where's the other copy?" And I say, "I don't have another copy." And he says, "Well, what happens if that laptop dies? Are you going to have your thesis?" He's like, "I don't want to have you lose your mind inside the office here if you don't have it." Right. He said, "I've seen it before." And so one thing, I brought a mindset of kind of, you might call it paranoia, but, how do we build resilient data storage capacity? How do we develop now with the, more ubiquitous use of logic-based programming capacity in First Nations to use automated systems to not only gather, but then organize, categorize, and then visualize and mobilize data sets, all while them being protected for the long term is a big challenge. And I think that it kind of goes on behind the scenes. But I think there has to be some emphasis on that. There's so much data out there now. When I came to Alexis, for instance, I found old data sets. I basically found old archives of people who had tried to achieve what we're trying to achieve, and they didn't have a roadmap to look back at what they had achieved for us to harvest the knowledge out of that incredible work. So I think that there's a real emphasis in my organization on data sovereignty, data sharing, and it's a lot of work. It's kind of its own work, really. And you find that it takes a lot of effort and thinking to protect your data sets. And then, there's a long legacy of mistrust where even, for myself, some of the data sets that I have, it's like, well, how do I share those? Who do I share them with? So there has to be some real heavy thinking about data sharing policies that are able to create comfort for us to actually mobilize these data sets properly. Otherwise, they will just die in people's laptops and it'll all be for naught. So I don't know if that's helpful.
It's very helpful. Thank you. And a lot of, it's very helpful. And I understand it's the issue of trust, I understand, is absolutely critical. I've heard that in all the conversations that I've been having, that, that we have to be very humble, and we have to build relationships and reaching out to Indigenous knowledge holders, even to begin a conversation to ask about the sharing of knowledge. And so I hear that from what you've said and take it to heart, and hope that we're able to bring that to our project in some sense. Thank you very much for your answer.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, that humility is so, so important. And of course, relationships are everything. So thank you for that. Anyone else? I saw a comment earlier from Desiree asking about the next milestone for the toolkit. That's a fantastic question. Next steps for the toolkit really are getting the word out, and we could use your help with that. So feel free to forward the website to anyone and everyone in your contacts. Also inviting more stories. We would love to see that stories section expand to a place where we're thinking about how to reorganize it. We would love to see dozens and dozens of stories on there. So if anyone on the line can think of a climate monitoring project that's happening or program that's happening, it could be related to the ICBCM program or not at all. It could be something that your community is doing through other means or just on your own. We would love to at very least feature it on the map, and or you can connect with us to be able to share your story in a deeper format. And you'll see as you're flipping through the stories, they each have the same format, but they're written in very different ways, in different voices. Many of them do include videos and actual how-to instructional videos. Huey's, for example, you'll see Huey talking about how to set up that weather monitoring station. So check out the stories, but also please contribute to them. And then, with those questions here, there's obviously a need and a want for folks to be able to connect. And we hear that over and over. What are some ways that we can really map out the success stories, but also get communities talking? So we are in talks in the background about a next milestone being a community of practice. And of course, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, we will work with different partners who are already doing who have similar networks as Marlene was mentioning, the Climate Hub, for example. But there is clearly that need and that want for a community of practice where folks can come together and have the space to be able to talk about these really important projects. We'll go back to Marnie.
Thank you. This question is around the maintenance of the website. So, it's a wonderful website. There's a ton of information, so helpful. But I'm sitting here thinking, oh my goodness, the maintenance and the commitment to keeping it up to date. So,
that's been a question that we have been working with since the beginning of the project, knowing that it is so much information. So First Peoples Group is housing the website at this point in time. And for the future, we have a really great partnership with Spruce Creative, who is sort of at our whim whenever we do need changes. But we also have a more formal plan in place to go back to it at least once a year, if not more than that. We've regathered the authors a couple of different times to do that overview of the website. And as Marlene mentioned, we also have a group who's been who reads through it and gives us feedback on any changes and broken links, and takes sort of regular tours of the website to make sure that it's as alive as it can be. And we look forward to continuing that in the future.
Great. I see so much changing federally and provincially with policy regulations. And so, of course, keeping the information current is going to be critically important. So it's nice to gain some confidence around that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Excellent. We've only got one more minute, so I think we'll call that our last question. Marlene, any final words from you before I do a little bit of a closing and say goodbye to these wonderful folks on the line?
Just a huge thank you, Melissa, to yourself for leading us through the call today. And again, to Huey for sharing his story in such a vivid way, both on the toolkit and today. To everyone who's contributed over the 4 years since we've been working on this project. Really appreciate that and look forward to continuing those connections and relationships moving forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Chimigwech to everybody who's joined us today. We started in spirit, and I will close out in the same way, again, with the words of Richard Wagamese. And this one always reminds me of that ethical space that we try to create and that two-eyed seeing. And is that reminder that everybody who's come to the call today, everybody who is this rippling network of people who care about the climate, are actually all related. So this is called All My Relations. I've been considering the phrase all my relations for some time now. It's hugely important. It's our saving grace in the end. It points to the truth that we are all related, that we are all connected, that we all belong to each other. The most important word is all, not just those who look like me, sing like me, dance like me, speak like me, pray like me, or behave like me. All my relations. That means every person, just as it means every rock, mineral, blade of grass, and creature. We live because everything else does. If we were to choose to collectively live that teaching, the energy of our change of consciousness would heal each of us and heal the planet. So with that, we'll say goodbye and until our paths cross again, and stay in touch. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care.